What's up? Welcome to Purpose Living, where we will be taking a dive into what it means to live on purpose. I am your host, Christina Estrada, founder of Purpose Culture. Grab your favorite cocktail, beer, a cup of coffee, or tea, and come sit with me each month as we listen to inspiring guests tell stories of how they have made massive strides in living out their purpose. Welcome to Living Purpose Podcast, and I am so excited that you've once again taken space in your time to join us. It is a great month. We're going to be leaning into some really great topics, and so welcome. As usual, before I introduce our guest, I'm going to guide us in just a little bit of grounding. So wherever you're at, go ahead and close your eyes down or lower your gaze. Maybe even stop what you're doing and just give me a second here as we tap in, that we begin to recognize why we're here, what we're doing here, and to drop in. So take a couple breaths in. Just let your own breath begin to guide you as you inhale and you exhale. And just a recognition of the space that you're in, the parts of your body that are connected to the earth, maybe the parts of your body that are connected to a chair or a couch or the seat in your car. And then begin to deepen your inhales and your exhales, adding a little bit more air as you breathe in. As you exhale out, exhaling out a little bit more air that you took in. And begin just to find a rhythm here in your breath as you inhale in and out. As usual, as we come to this space of learning, this space of exploring and growing in knowledge, I've been going through this book called The Unfolding, which was a book that was one of our suggestions last month. And there's this part in the book where she comes to the healing part and the mending part of our relationship with ourselves. And she has this poem called Repotted. It says, "When a plant outgrows its surroundings, it does not shrink to remain. Instead, it expands, and so must its surroundings. All that to say, you are not too much. Everywhere around you is simply too small." And I read that primarily because it speaks to the expansion, that as we're growing and as we're learning, as we're taking in information, that it gives us the opportunity to see things from a different angle, to learn, to set a different kind of volume to our ears, to listen more deeply, more intensely, to take what we feel that would serve us and to really expand and grow us in ways that maybe we would never even expect. And so today, what would that expansion look like for you? What would you need to let go of in order to make space to listen? We'll take 2 more breaths in. One final collective breath in through the nose. And then exhale everything, maybe out of the mouth this time. Begin to blink the eyes open. Wiggle ourselves around. We're here, we arrived, and it is my great pleasure to introduce to you my friend, April Smith. We were just sitting down and talking, and we're like, this is weird. I don't think we've really ever gotten to do this. We're usually in passing, and we have a connected soul. I know that because every time we see each other, we give each other long hugs.
I know.
And it's just life right now just does not allow more time than that, it seems like.
I know.
So welcome. I'm so glad that you're here.
It's sweet friendships found in 5-minute increments for the last 10 years. I don't know, something like that.
That is so true. And that's good. 10 minutes for every couple times we see each other. Well, we've hung out an hour a year. That's what our lives have allowed us for this time.
Maybe the future holds more.
Yes, I think so. I think so for sure. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Give us a little April Smith and what she's doing. And I invited you here, obviously, for a purpose, as we are entering this realm and this different season in purpose culture. It is really important that we hear from those people who are dealing with those that we want to impact most. And that's primarily, obviously, our youth. And you are very intertwined with that. And so first, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I've been intertwined with youth. I think my whole, since I was a teenager. So it's been, and I'm not a teenager anymore. Far from it. I went to UC Riverside and got my my BS in psychology, and then transferred over to Azusa Pacific University and got my master's in education to be a high school guidance counselor. But then went on this long journey of being a mom. I have a 21-year-old and a almost 20-year-old. So in the middle of my college years, I was connected to high school students doing youth ministry. That became a lot more part of my life as a young adult. So while I was newly married, my husband and I served at a local church doing youth ministry and have just always felt connected with the youth. And then recently have raised teenagers. And now I work at a local high school as a school counselor. But in the meantime, before I jumped into that career, I was a wedding photographer for 15 years and got to work closely with young adults. Young adults in all ages, because it seemed like the marrying age doesn't have a defined world anymore. Nope. So sometimes they were like 20 and then sometimes they were like 40. But still newly into that relationship. So I feel like I've walked alongside teenagers for the past, I am 30 years maybe. I have a huge heart for teenagers. I feel connected to that group. I substitute taught at elementary schools, junior high and elementary, and absolutely hated it. So I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that high school teenage kids were my passion. Absolutely.
When did you know that? Was that just something that was always in you? You were like, yes, this is what I want to do? Or was there a time where you were like, oh, this was a pivotal time that I can put my thumb on that was this is...
I can remember I think I was a senior in college, could have been my junior year, somewhere around that time frame, and went to church with my friend who was involved in the youth group, and I just loved teenagers. I don't think I knew any of them. And then when I graduated college, I moved back home and decided to get involved in the youth group at my church, and that's where I just knew, yes, I love these group of people. And at that time, I was substitute teaching. And I would literally go out to the lunch quad and hang out with the kids while I was the fun sub. I was the one that was just really connected with them and hanging out with them. And I don't think I've lost that over the years. I just love engaging with this age group and pouring into them. It's just
I feel neat. That's just you though. I feel like there is something about you that's there's a connection. And so I feel like they probably feel seen just like most people do in your presence.
It's a valuable practice, I think, connecting with people. So I like to be
And your husband also has been very involved with you for years.
Yes. So he's 6 years older than I am. And so he started his high school ministry a little bit before I did. But that's how we met. We were both involved in youth group.
I didn't know that.
We secretly dated because we didn't want any of the kids to know.
Oh, yeah.
Then when we got engaged, everyone was like, but wait, to who? Who's this person? A few of the girls back then got really mad because they thought they were going to grow up and marry Mark Smith. Aww. So it caused some hurtful feelings, but they got over it. We were meant to be together. And we've been married 23 years now.
Yeah, that's the one thing I've learned from Rogers. You don't tell some kids some things because if anything changes, he's like, I just wear the same thing every day, just a different color, obviously, because I don't want anybody to notice anything different about me.
Yeah.
He's like, I don't want anybody taunting me about I look nice today, or why? He's like, no, that's just what you don't do with teenagers. I'm like, all right, something I guess I have to learn. So as we kind of move into the decision to become a school counselor, why was that the thing that you felt instead of being a teacher or being involved some other way with youth or being a youth leader or something like that, why was a school counselor, did that seem to fit you?
I think I stumbled upon it. I grew up in a home with two educators. So my dad was at the high school level, my mom was at the junior high level in teaching administration. So I always was in that world, but never thought I never said growing up that I wanted to be a teacher. I don't even think I knew I wanted to work in education, to be honest. So I went to UC Riverside as a bio major, took chemistry and absolutely hated it and barely scraped by with a C. And I'm like, this isn't for me. If I can't pass chemistry, then I'm in the wrong major. So at the time I was taking a psychology class, switched my major to psych, and just never looked back. And fortunately, with psychology degrees, there's really not a lot of avenues for a career. I could either go be a therapist, which that didn't seem really my cup of tea. So I switched my major from biology to I switched it from biology to psychology because of the chemistry component, which to all those science majors, good for you. So that put me on a different trajectory. I went to APU for my master's thinking that I wanted to be a school psychologist. That inquired a lot of testing and didn't have that personal connection with kids, so decided to switch then again to be a school counselor because I knew that would just have that one-on-one relationship with the students. But right out of college, I couldn't get a job as a school counselor because I didn't have my teaching credential. So I ran into a couple roadblocks right away from the get-go, and that's why I ended up becoming a wedding photographer, which I think I touched on already, but we can revisit that one. So
when you how tell us like a little bit about what that looked like being a counselor. What was it that drew you even like specifically to, I know like you obviously were drawn to youth and especially that age group, but what about that maybe like intrigued you and pulled you in more than like a junior high? Like you could have been a counselor for a junior high, you could have been like a principal or an assistant principal, but what about that drew you in?
I think learning psychology and the way the mind works is what really drew me into the career. And then on this, as a side benefit, I just liked working with high school students. So I think the two things just kind of merged
nice
together. Right. And I don't think I would have ever thought that this is what I would be doing or this is where the Lord was going to lead me because I didn't kind of know that that's where I was heading. So I think it was just, I loved learning psychology. I loved learning about the mind, but then I also just really liked that teenage year. I do not like junior hires. Like if that was easy, no, I don't understand those little minds and their squirreliness and their awkwardness. I hated junior high myself.
Right.
So
that's the age where I always look back and I'm like, that was...
High schoolers.
Wasn't my best era.
High schoolers, teenagers, they can talk with you and they're starting to formulate their ideas and their thoughts, and they really need solid people in their lives to help them kind of come to grips with who they are and where they're going. So
how would you say, like, I'm just curious of what your experience was like early on with youth and then in comparison to what you see now. Like, what are the like shifts that you've seen maybe in the last like 20 years working with youth, 20 years to now, I would imagine would be different. I'm sure there's some similarities too, but what have you experienced?
I think the fundamental issues are the same. It's just has a different mask, and you would call it social media and technology, but underlining issues of feeling insecure and not understanding what other people think because they're so caught up in what they think. So they just can't, like, you have to think these teenagers are learning for the first time their own feelings and how to name those feelings and what those feelings mean. And so they can't even necessarily recognize that in another person. So their immaturity in their emotions creates just this wealth of insecurity and frustration and loneliness and sadness in them. And I think we even experienced that when we were kids. Like,
I experienced that last month.
Yeah. I know. Hopefully as an adult you figured out how to deal with it a little bit more healthily.
Yeah, you do. But I'm like, I experience that regularly. Yeah.
And I maybe that's a human issue. But now the exploitation of social media and the way that they see and misconstrue other people and what they're thinking and what their lives look like, it just adds this whole nother element to where I think that it takes it to the next level.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I could see that. I could see how. I think it's different with every generation. There's something different that is like you could pin it on whatever it is. But yeah, it seems like the social media and I think it doesn't matter. I mean, even when I was in high school, it's like you cared about what people thought. You go to school, it's just, everybody cares about what, the next person next to them thinks.
Exactly.
It's just different.
I know it's easy to blame social media, because
yeah.
it is in our face so much, but also students are constantly saying, well, this friend doesn't like me anymore. They didn't respond a certain way to me and made me feel uncomfortable, or they're not talking to me. And so even that face-to-face interaction and the bullying and the adverse reactions to each other, like it's still prevalent and it's still happening. And I think it happened ages ago and still going on.
Yeah.
So it's part of being a teenager.
Race, yeah.
It sucks.
Right? I know.
I didn't want to go back to that time in my life ever.
I just went to my 30-year reunion and I was like, first of all, like they put my picture from high school on my
that's funny
chest. I was like,
no, thank
what
you.
is this? I'm like, this is not.
So people would recognize you.
I know. And I was like, this is not my, like, first of all, 90s was not like the greatest. 80s and 90s was the greatest era for like hair and makeup.
Right.
So I look at my daughter and I'm like,
funny.
wow. I'm like, you look way more put together than I did at your age. But yeah, it's like but it was interesting because when I took that off, I took my like little name label off and I was looking at her. It was really like, it was weird. Don't think I'm weird, but I kind of had a conversation with her. Like that was like the old version of me, but also thanking her for like who she was and the ways that she showed up and the ways that she has changed and grown. And I'm like gonna cry now. Like, but it's like I wish that every kid knew that that's just a moment and that those are the times you thank yourself for being all that you could be for yourself then, and the fact that you were going to have so much opportunity to learn and grow. And it's like if kids could see what they'll be in 30 years, I wonder like how different it may be.
Unfortunately, I think because our human self, we're very selfish and we're very self-reflective and even narcissistic to a point. And these kids, they can only see themselves and they only see what they're experiencing and their feelings, and they don't have the power yet to look outside themselves and try to get the other person's perspective. Right. And that is so debilitating. And so teaching kids like you are with your daughter of how to look beyond that and to incorporate other people's perspectives and to see things differently. It's really powerful in helping them kind of ground themselves in who they are and know it's okay to be who they are. Yeah. And
you can hold two things at one time.
And
multiple things at one time.
Understand that just because somebody looks at you a different way doesn't mean that they don't like you. They're just having their own issue.
It's just the wrong emoji. I'm like, sorry, I didn't know how to use all these things. Yeah. It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. So all that to say is I think teenage problems are still the same as they've always been. We just see it manifesting, I think, a little bit.
So what would you say like the biggest thing that you're seeing in youth is like the biggest challenge that kids are facing today? I mean, I know you but if you were to put like a 1, 2, 3 on it.
Honestly, I think kids are confused. There's so much confusion wrapped around just be whoever you want to be and express it however you want to express it, and the freedom that's given in that. And just let me back up for a second. When my kids were really little, I'm talking like 2, 3, 4 years old. I have 2 boys. They're 17 months apart. I learned during that time that you really shouldn't ask toddlers questions because they don't know how to answer or choose between 2 different things. And I can remember being a parent and saying, hey, do you want to watch Blue's Clues or The Wiggles? And then there would be a meltdown all of a sudden. I'm like, these are both your favorite. Like, why can't you choose? Or do you want this breakfast or this breakfast or this snack or this snack? And realized when I was reading up on this from a psychologist that kids don't have the ability to make a decision between 2 things that they love at such a young age. And that as a parent, to create a safe environment for them, you should choose for them. And so you're like, okay, today we're going to watch The Wiggles. Tomorrow we'll watch Blue's Clues. Like, here we go. Here's this laid out for you. So you know what to expect. And you know what? If you don't want to watch The Wiggles today, just let me know. We can put something else on, and giving them the opportunity to speak their mind. But removing the opportunity to choose because they just didn't have the power. How do you choose between two things that you really love?
Yeah.
And so we've grown up in a society, I think, that has allowed people to just choose. But how do you make those decisions if you don't even know what you really like? And so as teenagers now, there's just so much out there. There's so much in their face with the social media, with the ability to choose. But then also if you choose something and it's not accepted by other people, then you've chosen wrong. So there's, you know, a lot of hand tying around the choosing.
Yeah.
So I feel like students still need to be guided. There's too many options. There's too much to choose from. Just limit it and let them like, here's one thing and one thing. Let's talk about the benefit of this and the harm of that. And how do you
It's almost like
figure it
slowing
out?
down and like
Yeah.
taking one step at a time. They're bombarded all the time with all of these different choices. And it's almost like saying, okay, here's 5 things we can choose from. Let's talk about these things instead of like, I could see that would be really challenging. I mean, it is even for us, right? Like you look through your social media, how many things do you have choices to click on? Tons. And it doesn't even forget social media, just getting on Google.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you Google search, like if I'm doing a project or something, it's like you Google search something. It's like, okay, there's like 150 videos on this one little tiny thing. It's like, which one do I choose? I always have that like, how do I choose between all these? Like the most like likes, the like stars by it. Like, you know, it's like there's so many choices that's, I think like what I'm hearing you say is that being a counselor is part of like limiting maybe those choices or talking about a couple of choices rather than it being like, here's the sky's the limit.
Yeah. So when I took away the choices for my kids during that important time frame, and really it was like until they're 5 years old, you shouldn't give them any choices. And then when they're 5, you allow them to have 1 or 2 choices, like between choose things, and you slowly allow them to work up that muscle. The temper tantrums totally stopped. Like it was amazing. It was such a transformation with them. And so, I wonder today, like kids are being allowed to choose their sexuality. Like when you talk about these big, heavy things, they're allowed to choose who they want to be and what gender they want to be. That's a big decision. And how can students make that choice with the thought of just, oh, well, whatever feels right, but yet our feelings are so misleading. And we've already decided that they don't have words to describe their feelings because they don't have the vocabulary yet because they're still learning. And so you throw in the mix this opportunity to choose, and it's just overwhelming.
Yeah.
And then you should expect a meltdown because that's what happened with the little toddlers.
Yeah.
It was overwhelming. You have a meltdown.
Yeah.
So now you've got teenagers. They're overwhelmed by these choices, and you're seeing the meltdown.
What are the needs that you're seeing like for youth today? Like what types of things in support systems are lacking that they could benefit from? What are some ways that I don't know. What are some things that you think would be helpful or that you're seeing?
I think that fundamental need to be loved and accepted is a deficit in children and teenagers. And I know we do a good job of loving people, especially in our families, but there are broken homes out there. And I see that on a regular basis, and that's heartbreaking. There's a lack of love, though, I think, between the teenagers themselves. Like they get so caught up in their own world and the way that they're feeling that they don't realize how to love one another or to love each other well. Even with the teacher-student combination, the love isn't always received, and it's certainly not talked about because yes, we want to respect people, but to genuinely make somebody feel loved means that they feel welcomed and appreciated and that they're safe. And there's a lot of situations on campus where that's not happening for various reasons. And so the fundamental need to feel loved, I think is something that we can all work on, just loving those that are around us.
Yeah.
And every time a student comes into my office, I want them to feel loved. But then I've had situations where people have told me later, it was a very uncomfortable situation with a student where she didn't experience that in my office. I'm like, okay, well, what did I do wrong here? How do I need to change for the next one so that doesn't happen again? So, as a professional, I constantly need to think like, well, just because I show compassion towards one student doesn't necessarily work for another.
Right.
So,
Right.
just kind of thinking,
Yeah. No, and
how to
also
reach
like
everyone.
even just thinking of how important that empathy piece is, that we already assume that a teacher has that or that a parent has that, but we have to realize that may not be something that they're experiencing. And how are they going to be empathetic and loving when they're not accepting or they're not receiving that by the people around them?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's like that's a big deficit, I would
And
imagine.
I think empathy and nurturing and all those motherly words, to get a little like specific in just the nurturing component, though that doesn't necessarily come easy to some people. And I know other women who that doesn't come easy for. But I think being able to make somebody feel safe and valued, everyone should be able to do
Yeah.
that. And it's learning those skills,
Yeah.
but it comes a lot easier for a counselor because
Yeah.
I'm trained in those things.
What would that look like for somebody? Like, what does it look like for a student to come into your class or into your office and feel safe?
Well, it's super cute in my office. I've got cute curtains and cozy chairs,
Yeah.
and just has a warm, welcoming vibe. But I think that just my body language, turning, facing the student, making eye contact, listening, not interrupting, asking the right questions. And that's probably the hardest part for me, is what kind of questions to ask, and building rapport and knowing that each student is on a different journey and it's different questions and it's a different way of rapport building and trying to be sensitive to that. And also the passage of time has to happen in order for trust to be built. This year is my second year at my high school, and I feel like this year the students that I got to know last year are relaxed around me, and I love seeing the fruit of that, of like knowing, okay, we've had the time and
So
made
it's like relationship
progress.
building.
Totally. Yeah. And I always say you can't make new old friends. Like, I love that thought. Like, relationships take time, and you have to invest in that. Even you and I, like, even though we've only had these 5-minute conversations for the last 10 years, we feel like we're fast friends because there's been this element of time, and there's an oldness to that, which creates a safety element.
Yeah, that's so
you know?
true. So true. Yeah, I love that. So I want to move into this little section of just your advice, April Smith's advice for, and I ask you these questions because I obviously value what you have to say, and also know that these are not maybe like easy questions or an easy question or to formulate or advice to formulate. So, but if you could tell teachers anything that could help them better support youth, what would it be?
It's hard. All the teachers on my campus have a different personality. They come from different places. But there's a fundamental truth to students come into each classroom with an experience that they've had at home or off campus or in the hallways. And if that experience has been traumatic in some way, and it could be minor, it could be significant abuse, but whatever their experience is, their heart gets packed up with that experience. And so when they come into the classroom and they've got a lot of those experiences building up inside of them, then their heart is going to be pretty full of mostly negative things, because we're talking right now about more of traumatic experiences. So it could be, as simple as kids gossiping behind somebody's back and like the minor conflict, and then it could be like dad hit the student at home, like whatever it is, and everywhere in between. So these kids are coming in with these experiences, and and let's say they have a cup inside of their heart and it's all filled up to a certain level, and now you've got a test in the class and the student all of a sudden explodes. Well, they didn't have enough room in their heart to add any more stress or trauma or conflict, and so you see this exploding moment. And so how can you look holistically at the student and know, like, hey, okay, we're having this moment, but what else has been going on in your story and in your life to get you to that point? Because it was just a test.
Yeah.
Like, we shouldn't, the behavior doesn't really match what's going
Right.
on. And I think it's very hard to stop and do that. Like, when you have a student that explodes in your class, it's hard because you're managing a lot. There's a lot going on in the classroom. There's personalities in play, but to just stop and later circle back to the student and kind of question, like, hey, what's going on? How are you? You had this moment, but is something else going on? Do you need support? Do you need to talk? And just recognizing that these kids can sometimes carry around a lot more than we know.
Yeah, I love that you said that their heart is packed, because that's just such a good analogy of, like, understanding that they come with, and also the teacher comes with that as well. I mean, it's not just like the student, but they both, pretty much everybody comes with these, the whatever's filled within their heart. And I always have told my kids, and I've tried to even think about it this way, is that you never know that person that cut you off, or that person that whatever they did to you, you have no clue what they're going through. You have no idea. And so if you can look at them with just more of the eyes of just having more grace for them and understanding, then you may have a little bit of a shift in, like, your perspective of them. And I remember my daughter, she was young, and she called me out, of course, like most kids do. When you try to teach them something, you're like, that's not for me, that's for you. I was telling that to you. But it was a reminder, like, somebody cut me off, I got really upset. And she's like, but mommy, remember, we don't know what happened to them this morning. And I was like, yeah. But ouch. It was like one of those moments where you're like, like, we don't. And we all come with, like, a heart packed with something. And so, I love that. I love that. And also, just what would that, I'm just curious, because I'm really interested in how we can mitigate some of these kinds of things, like outbursts and things that come in that happen in the classroom. Because that was one of the things when I was going to a school, they were like, well, we're trying to, like, we'd like to utilize you in this area of bringing you in, and when there is, like, a blowout, bring you in and have you kind of work with. And I'm kind of like, how do we get before that?
Yeah.
Like, is there a check-in that can happen at the beginning of class? Is there's some sort of grounding or something? I don't know. Like, do you have any ideas floating around in your mind?
There's a whole movement called trauma-informed schools, and I think you and I have talked about that before. And just recognizing the student has coming in with stuff, I don't have any good ideas of how to see it before it happens, but after it happens, for the teacher or the adult to not be personally offended about what's happened, and to know, okay, the student's probably really struggling with something. And if you're, as the teacher or the adult, not the right person to talk to them about it, making sure that they do get connected with somebody that could help. And that's where I know your place would come in, and allowing for recovery there. I recently listened to a TED Talk that talked about psychological wounds. And I don't think I have ever thought of being hurt, my feelings being hurt as a psychological wound. And this professor, the psychologist that was talking, just had some really great things. Like, okay, so you get a psychological wound, you have been hurt emotionally. And so often we'll say, well, just, like, shake it off, you're fine. But if you broke your leg and you needed a cast, we wouldn't say, go shake it off, you're fine. Like, so to have treatment for our psychological wounds, and I've never really thought as hurt feelings or being dysregulated. That's also a new term these days. Or being upset or being angry or experiencing trauma. I've never thought of that as a wound to your mind. And
Yeah, it's a retracing, because every time we're wounded or traumatized, there's a retracing of the neurological pathways in our brain. So it's almost like a little like surge. You know, I think of it kind of like a circuitry, and then like there's little surges. Those surges don't just like go away. They don't just like, you know, heal themselves. You know, if you have a circuit, you know, in your house that happens, and there's a little spark, you know, in one of your your wiring, you have to get it fixed. It needs some attention. And so I think that we, like you said, are a society, and we've been raised by the generation that was shake it off, pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of. And that's, we've left a lot of short circuits and retracing of the neurological pathways unattended. So
yeah, when I was listening to this psychologist talk about how do you keep your mind healthy? So we know how to keep our bodies healthy. We've always trained ourselves for good hygiene. Like, you keep your teeth healthy by brushing them every night, and you eat a balanced diet because we know that's healthy, and we exercise because we're healthy. But what do we do for our mind specifically to keep it healthy? And I thought this was really interesting. He said, first of all, if you're feeling lonely, don't stay there. Take action. Like, go find someone that you can talk to and do something. Don't stay in that place of loneliness. And by doing that on a regular basis, then you are not letting yourself stay in that moment of self-pity and loneliness. You are taking action to make a healthy lifestyle for yourself. He also talked about how you can change your own responses to failure. So when you fail, and then we have that negative narrative in our head that just keeps us thinking, yeah, of course I failed. I'm not smart enough. I didn't study good enough. I didn't da-da-da-da. And you start to badger yourself. Well, just stop that. Like, stop your negative narrative because you have failed at something. And so change the internal narrative that's going on in your head. And then the last thing he talked about was protecting your self-esteem and being your own cheerleader and making sure that you are complimenting yourself and that you're celebrating your successes. And so if we can kind of do these things on a moment-to-moment, day-to-day basis, that is having good mental hygiene, and we're taking care of our psychological self so that we are healthy.
Yeah.
I just love those ideas.
That. Well, I know, thinking right now,
Yeah,
okay, like, I don't want to toot my own horn or anything, but like, even those three things that you just said.
Yeah.
The first one was to like
Not be lonely. Yeah.
right? So even within our journal is this place of like identifying who the safe people are in your life. Like, who are those safe people that you can go to when these things that you've identified that you're struggling with you're struggling, you're having a hard time. So choose those people, right? And then, so that's one thing, one of the sections. The other one you were talking about was hygiene, right? So like, just stop doing that. So it's like this switch. We kind of have this thing where it's like, there's this like brain dumping, and then the opposite, like, how are you going to create positive talk to yourself?
Yeah.
And then the other one you were talking about was healing,
response to failure.
Response to failure is the I am statements. We have I am statements like, I am smart. I am like limitless in my resources. All the things that you could be speaking to yourself, which then once you start speaking those things out, you do start believing those things. It has been proven in my home. Even though my children get mad at me and they're like, no, Mom, I do not want to do your dumb I am statements. Even when they do them, they have reaped the benefits of it because they're doing the work. They're the ones who are empowering themselves to do that.
Yeah,
so,
that is that.
So there are tools out there, and it's
Totally.
like, it's really exciting. Like, just even, we could talk about that for a long time, but
I know.
we'll go on to the next one.
Okay.
So, thank you for that. That was
Yeah.
really great. And I definitely need to get that TED Talk from you. So the next one is, if you could tell parents anything that could help better support their child, what would that be?
So many times I feel like I have a conversation with parents about the parents just want their kids to be an adult and to make the right choice, and they're not ready to do it yet. They still need that coaching. They still need that adult voice in their head telling them right from wrong. And maybe I did this too as a parent. I don't know. Like they start to get their feet under them. They're 16. They can drive.
Right.
They got the freedom. They're not doing anything bad, inherently bad. So you're giving them all of this responsibility. But yet then you still expect them to be on time and to do their work and to do their chores. But you're not going to tell them to do those things because you expect them,
Right.
because they are this little mini adult. You expect them to do all of those things, but they're kind of not there yet.
Yeah.
They just can't
Yeah.
handle that responsibility. So parents, I like telling parents that you are your teenagers' academic and emotional coach. Like you are at home, you are coaching them on how to be responsible, how to have good habits. They still need you, just like they would need a coach for baseball or someone for dance.
We would
Like,
never send like somebody to on a field and be like, all right, guys, go do it.
right.
That's the same thing.
But yet we send them to school and they're like,
Right.
all right, go do your
Go do
homework,
it.
go do your work.
Yeah.
And yes, the teachers play that role in the classroom, but not at home. So if the parents have that mindset of still coaching their kids at home, setting good boundaries and helping them develop schedules, but not all parents can do this and to
Yeah.
do this well. We as adults struggle with time management, and we get lost on scrolling, like that black death of scrolling. It was intentionally made to never end, so that you would be addicted and it would reinforce that addiction. So but if parents could just remember, like, yeah, it's a beautiful time to coach your kids and to be a part of their life in that capacity. Because how much do the kids love their coach? Usually it's a whole lot. So
Yeah.
building that kind of a relationship, you're not telling them what to do. You are coaching them through how to do it or what could look good.
Yeah.
So,
I love that.
and then you need to bench them when they don't perform. There needs to be firm consequences to actions. So if that means discipline in your home, if that means taking something away, there needs to be a consequence for a negative behavior, because that's really the way the world operates.
That's life.
Yeah, and that is how human nature operates.
Yeah.
So to not do that is such a disservice. This whole gentle parenting thing, I just feel like it doesn't work so well. And I think that there's so many ways to parent and discipline in love, and I mean, we could do a whole
Boundaries
episode on that
I know,
one.
right? A whole episode on that. Yeah. Boundaries are necessary.
They are necessary.
There's no way I
there's-
get around it.
There's necessary for
Yeah.
society to
Yeah.
function.
Yeah.
So there's no place that you can take them away and
Yeah.
expect things to go well. Like we need boundaries.
And then lastly, because I know this is so deep into your heart, if there were a teenager, if we had like a room of teenagers here, what would you say to them? What would you tell them?
Oh my gosh, to love yourself and to love others around you and to live a life being unoffended. I read this book a while back called Unoffendable. And yes, there are moments when people will do something that is mean and harmful and hurtful. And there are times to take action, to stand up for justice. But there are also times when people cut us off when we're driving and we get so offended, like what you shared before. And to have these moments where, or if somebody doesn't open the door for us, or if somebody says something and we take it the wrong way and we're offended, or if the teacher says something and it offends you, or there's so many little things that can offend us, but why? Like, why do we need to be offended by that? What purpose does that offense really have in our life? So if you could live a life where you're just not offended by other people, how much easier would life be? And so to lay that down, to let that go, and this book really talked about that. And we struggled through it. We didn't agree with a lot of things. We read it in our couples Bible study group years ago, but it's one that really stuck with me. We didn't always agree with what the author was saying, because he was pretty fanatical about not being offended by anything. And I know.
I am human.
I know. And it is a really hard walk to walk, but it can be so freeing to know, like, I'm not going to be offended by that, because why? Like, what does that offense really do other than make me angry, make me bitter, have negative thoughts on my life, which in turn hurts your health, and it fills your heart it packs it with those bad things. So if you could just walk around and not be offended by other people, and to see people for who they are, and like love people no matter what, I think that that's an important way to live.
And that senior picture of you, right, was not like the whole totality of your life. Like that's that kid that you know, like in 20 years, you're going to be somebody completely different too. I think it's like recognizing that kid, that we all change and we all grow and we all, we all learn. So this is my last question for you. So what is it that you're like excited to learn about this year, hoping in the areas that you're going to grow to support your community around you?
I will be on a team this year that looks at diversity and equity and inclusion. And I think we're kind of reframing that whole concept to be a powerful presence on campus. And how do we bring people together and allow people to feel safe on campus and empowered and included? And so I'm excited about that team and the work that I think is ahead of us. And I really, really want students to find like wellness in their life. And I think that it truly is a journey. And so it's these little baby steps towards how do you have a healthy mind, develop healthy coping styles, get help if you've had trauma in your life, and just feeling confident in yourself and feeling like you are valuable and treasured and loved, because everybody is valuable here. So to not let anyone think otherwise. And not everybody hears that in their life. And it breaks my heart because there's no reason why somebody shouldn't feel valuable.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Such a pleasure. Feel like we'll have many more of these conversations without a mic in front of our face, and I'm really looking forward to that. So thank you so much.
Good, friend. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Be sure to follow livingpurposed.podcast on Instagram for more in-depth conversation and opportunities to get your questions answered and to be encouraged along this path to learning and living out our divine purpose. Let's live purpose together.